thank you, Lucy. That was perfect. A great way to sort of start the session. I particularly loved the photograph of the that sort of bus plaza where the two people walking sort of completely obliviously with this huge, and I think it's to do with culture as well, a deep-seated culture of understanding that transit's part of the city and that it's part of everyday life. So look, that was perfect. Sets the scene ideally. So look, what I'm going to do now is we're going to give Lucy a bit of a break to have a glass of water or wine or whatever you want. And I'm going to introduce the panelists. They're going to come up one at a time. As they come up, I'm going to introduce and talk a little bit about them. So first up is Shane. So Shane Ellison. Shane is our chief executive, the new chief executive at Auckland Transport. Shane has been the CEO. You're getting a clap. Shane's been the CEO since December, and we're all working, a lot of us are working very closely with Shane and his team. He's arrived at a really important moment in our genesis as a city. So he's a really key player, and so it's great to have you here tonight, Shane. Thank you. He has over 20 years experience globally as a senior leadership roles in transport and infrastructure sectors. Most recently, Shane was an International Development Officer and Chief Operating Officer for the New South Wales and Queensland for Transdev. They're the world's largest private operator of public transport. Really importantly also, Shane has worked all around the world, particularly in Europe and also in North America. So it's great to have him as our new CEO, and it's good to have him here tonight. Next up tonight is Michael Hale. Michael's a public health medicine specialist at the Auckland Regional Public Health Service. So Michael, do you want to join us up on the stage? Dr. Hale is a public health medicine specialist at the Auckland Regional Public Health Service, where he is the clinical lead for nutrition, physical activity, promotion, healthy urban form, and a word I'd never known before, but it's pertussis. Is that right? The right pronunciation? Whooping cough. Which is whooping cough, which I didn't know. So pertussis. He's part of the Healthy Auckland Together coalition, which is changing our city so it is easy for our people to eat well and to be active. So these themes are powerful and linked. Michael has over 14 years' experience in the public health sector, including roles in the Heart Foundation, the National Screening Unit, and Public Health Service, and apologies for that. So yeah, thank you, Mike. I don't know where the rest of your introduction is. I apologise. That's good. Oh, here we go. Sorry. I think it's important that we get the full picture. So you've got 14 years' experience in the public health sector, including roles in the Heart Foundation, the National Screening Unit, and the Health Quality and Safety Commission. Michael is interested in how urban and transport planning can improve well-being in our neighbourhoods and how we can reduce the promotion and availability of unhealthy food in favour of nutritious food. So thank you for coming tonight. And last but not least is a gentleman who many of you know, Councillor Richard Hills. Richard, do you want to come and join us on stage? Richard, my team say we're lucky to have him. He's a passionate promoter and champion for alternative modes of transport, including Skypath, rail to the North Shore. He's a very vocal and strong advocate of public and active transport, has a huge interest in mental health and well-being, and our team have talked to you a lot about that, Richard. He's also the Deputy Chair of the Planning Committee. Councillor Darby is the Chair, who's here tonight, and which has responsibility for Auckland's transport, infrastructure, spatial planning, water and regeneration. So you're a great ally to have for the city, and we're proud to have you on board. So thank you for coming tonight. So look, there's your panelists tonight who are joining Lucy. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a 20 minutes chat, and we're going to see how that goes. So what I thought we'd do first is we've heard about them and their roles, but what I'd like to do now is to be a bit pointed and ask about what you think and how you think, and that will give us a sense of who you are and how it's all working. So I'm going to direct the first question to Shane. So look, Shane, Lucy's shown us in her presentation about that link between streets, urban design, and favouring walking and cycling and public transport are absolutely critical, fundamental to public health. What do you think of that, firstly? And secondly, what is Auckland Transport doing to ensure that our roads and streets are better designed for active travel? Shane. Is that working? Yeah? Can everyone hear? Let's do a quick sound check. Do you want to say hello, hello?
Hello.
Okay,
Kia ora
great.
koutou.
Perfect.
Lucy, can you wave your wand and just make it all happen now for us, please? It'd make my job a lot easier. Look, it's hard to argue with that. We have a very tragic situation in Auckland at the moment in our region, with the number of deaths and serious injuries on our roads having escalated by 70% between 2014 and 2017. Lucy touched on the number of teenagers that are not active, sadly, and many of you in the room will have secondary school-aged children or children approaching secondary school. That situation is far worse. The number of, and Catherine might correct me, but the number of secondary school-aged children that were killed or seriously injured on our roads in 2014 was around 56. In 2017, that number had grown to over 100. If they're not feeling safe on our streets, how are they going to be active? So, yes, we've got a lot of work to do, but thankfully, we have a council and central government and a board of Auckland Transport that where they are 100% aligned. Okay. We have a once in a generation opportunity to make transformational change in Auckland with the funding that's been achieved through ATAP and which is targeted at almost all parts of the model that Lucy's presented. So we are committed to delivering on that. It won't be easy. Yeah. Let's not kid ourselves. It won't be easy. I'd like to have the wand, but yes, we're 100% committed to that.
And you, Shane, I mean, you're here new. You're here for a good time, because it's important that we hold this agenda for a period of time and not just in and out. And so, what's your commitment to Auckland?
I mean, I think it's important we recognise that I left here in 2004, and I've told this. Many people will have heard me say this. I've been away for 14 years. I've come back, and it's very easy when you live in the city day to day to not see the difference. And a number of people in the city need to take a lot of credit for what has been achieved in the last 14 years. And for those of you who don't know, 2017 we celebrated the first year where more people came into the city by public transport than by private vehicle. That is a huge achievement, and it's been done on the back of a political commitment, and it shows the way for the future. My commitment, I'd love to see the urban cycleway network completed. Yeah. The continuation of the investment in the program business case for walking and cycling, all the investment in public transport, all the transformational change that brings in terms of public realm, and the flow-on benefits that all that enables. We have the third biggest population, third most obese population in the OECD. I mean, we've got to do something about it.
Okay, well that's a great start. Thank you very much. That's a great way to introduce Shane to all of you and to get the conversation going. Next up, we're going to just have a quick question to you, Michael. It's along similar lines a little bit, but health starts with our streets. We've just heard that. It's absolutely fundamental. I guess the active travel program, the investment in walking and cycling, public transport, better planning. What is your district health board, and what is your team doing? How are you part of this conversation? How are you part of the solutions? Because obviously this is all inextricably linked. So could you just give us a sense of what you thought about Lucy, what she was saying, not about Lucy, but the story that's been told here, and what are you guys doing to be part of that solution?
Sure. Back in 2014, the health boards of Auckland came to our organisation recognising the big impact that the rising amount of childhood obesity was causing, and asked us to take some leadership in coordinating a program.
Yeah.
What we've got out of that is the Healthy Auckland Together group, which has got a little stand over there that you're welcome to check out some of the activities. You know, often these things have been the health sector getting together, and it's been really important with our health partners to do that. But in this time as well, we recognise that we're good at treating disease, but most of the causes and most of the levers for this issue lie well outside of the health system. And so if we want to make action on physical activity, action on nutrition, action on obesity, then we need to be talking to the people who are in charge of the built environment. So Auckland Council and Auckland Transport are key partners in Healthy Auckland Together. So there's an alliance, a coalition dedicated to addressing this issue at a citywide level. So that's been really key to have that platform. Through that platform, we've been, these different sectors of health and local government have got together around the program business case for cycling, currently around the strategy for safety as well. We've also recognised something else in the public realm. Water infrastructure is really lacking in Auckland. Yep. It touches on the design office, but if we were to compare Melbourne or Brisbane or other cities, we're at a third to a half of the level of water infrastructure, and we don't even know where it all is. And that's an important part if we want people to be active, if we want people to have healthy choices in those realms. And so we've got together around the project called Why Auckland to start improving both infrastructure and the public promotion of water as a healthy choice, deliberately aiming to displace sugary sweetened beverages as a choice there. So there's a number of tangible actions. Yep. In reference to the Healthy Streets approach, just a complete endorsement that a healthy street is a livable street. I think there's wins for health, wins for good design, wins for people. So yeah, really excited about that.
Thank you. I mean, I guess, Lucy, it's interesting coming from the UK originally. In the councils in New Zealand, in the UK, we would control health, education, there's police services. That's what the CEOs did within the local authorities even. Here, that is all in central government. That is all funded through that. So I guess that coalition is trying to solve that issue. But I think, do you think then it needs to be more done to drive that through? Because it's about the delivery on the ground, and the two things often don't link. Where do we put schools? It's really interesting to see that has been quite a separate conversation to planning when it's actually intricate to that.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of benefits to having them all housed in one. We can see an example of a successful city addressing some of these issues like New York, where you've got a transport commissioner and you've got a public health commissioner looking at things like size of soft drinks and that type of thing as well. And in New Zealand, we are in our silos. And so that's particularly why we've taken this Healthy Auckland Together approach to bring everyone together to make sure that the built environment is really supporting the people making healthy choices.
Okay, well that's really interesting. We often compete with Australia a lot in what we talk about, and I think we have more fast food outlets, drive-ins per capita than Australia, which is not a great achievement. And I think if you design places to be easy to do certain activities, people will do that. Human beings are, I say often lazy, but maybe they're efficient. They'll look for the easiest way to do something, and if you make a city easy to behave in a certain way, they will. So all those pieces need to link together. So
I totally agree. It's a systems issue, and if you're seeing every part of the population putting on weight or struggling to meet physical activity guidelines or eat well, this is not an issue of individual behavioural choice. It's not a collective failure of goodwill. This is us responding to a system that is pushing us in this direction. And a system is really good at producing a very consistent outcome, and we've got a very consistent outcome, and so we need to address the system to change that.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, that was a theme that Lucy talked about, the systems thinking, which is critical. So look, Richard, an interesting question. If you were mayor in 10 years' time, I'll say, what would you do? And how would you ensure this is embedded into the thinking that we're applying for the city?
Yes. First of all, just want to thank everyone for all the, we're just the politicians. Many of you are doing the mahi on the ground in this work, or doing the campaigning and the activism and all the advocacy that gets us to make the decisions we made for the 10-year budget, and will force us all to make better decisions and work even harder. So I just want to put that out there. And if the hypothetical situation came up that I was mayor in 10 years, Lucy would be the CEO of Auckland Transport after Shane has left. But
That's a great answer.
I think, well, the obvious answer is that we would do things based on evidence with our roads and streets and our cities, town centres. But also, my personal view would to be try and get, well, we would just use the evidence. But the other thing was to get local people involved, but from children to older people on every street in the area. So when I was on the local board, actually, I set up some children's panels, and everyone expected the young people would ask for outlandish things. All they wanted was safe walkways, safe streets, this particular footpath fixed up, this light fixed. It was all the things that are so obvious that we miss, maybe because we're looking at the overall picture. So you don't, and I don't think the loud voices of anti-change can really, I mean, they probably can, but they can tell kids that they're wrong. I think we'd fix a whole lot more if we just asked kids, is your local street safe? Would you cross it? Would you walk to school if you could? All those sorts of things. It's bringing young people into the decision-making straight away, and it's also that ownership of every, so it might not be possible to do it on every street, but I'm sure you could get your local schools to do a proper focus on healthy streets, and then if you fix it for young people and you fix it for our oldest people in the community, then you're probably going to fix it for everyone, I think.
Yeah, and you're a huge proponent of the impact of mental health issues as well. I mean, is there any sort of, how's that going in terms of your position around that, looking at the city and how we're doing in that space? What are the things we could do better, and maybe perhaps give us a sense of what you'd like to achieve from that point of view?
Yes, I mean, when I first got into, so I used to work as a youth worker before I was on the council, and I worked mostly with young people in high schools around Auckland, and the biggest issue constantly was obviously people's mental health, youth suicide. You know, some of the young people I worked with unfortunately took their lives during that time. There is a lot of negativity, sadness, and that has a million different factors. But I think the way our city is built and the way we interface with nature and art and happiness and events and other people has a huge impact on our mental health. So if maybe we could, you know, meet more people, talk more, not just drive home, go behind our gate and never talk to our neighbours. Maybe if we had more spaces to bump into each other, young people could run around on their own without having to be parents being afraid of their kids running out on the streets. If people were just able to spend more time in places that weren't just car parks or roads, that would be, you know, a really good outcome, I think. I mean, I usually bus to work. The other day I didn't have to drive, I chose to drive. But I drove, I was back and forth all day. But honestly, it was the most, I think I was more frustrated and more stressed out than any other day that week. It was triple the time to get here. It was the most negative experience. I'm a person who likes to let people in, which is apparently a crime. So letting people, you know, and people were beeping, waving their hands, pulling their fingers because you're just trying to be friendly to other people on the road, which is easy when you're walking or on the bus or whatever. But I think our city currently, we're getting there, we're moving forward, but is currently designed for really negative interactions with fake people. Like it's that cyclist, those people, you know, where it's just, you know, your friend. I kind of hate using the oh,
Yeah.
what if it was your mother? Or, well, it should be, what if it was just another human, I guess.
Yeah.
And we don't look at people like that when we're on our way to work if you're in a car.
That's good, and I think, you know, we talk a lot on Twitter as well, and there was that recent tweet talking about Elon Musk's opinions about public transport and how, you know, sitting next to somebody who's sort of socially deprived, and, you know, there's that elite projection thing going on, which is all around the world, you know, white middle-class men telling everybody else how to live, and I suppose, you know, it's interesting having that discussion, and when somebody on the tweet said, you know, when I don't drive, I feel more connected. When I drive, I feel more lonely, and it's an interesting piece of the jigsaw puzzle. So that whole system thinking is key. So look, thank you very much. Lucy, just bring you into the discussion for a second, and then we'll try and have a debate. But, you know, how did it happen? How on earth did you end up at TfL? I worked there many years ago, and I couldn't imagine them having a public health specialist running a program at TfL. What is it that happened? Who did you speak to? Who did you convince? Because it's easy to talk about theory, but what happened, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. So at this present moment in time, I'm the only public health specialist working in a transport authority anywhere in the world. And this is because it's not structurally set up that is a thing that happens. So I was recently described, and I think it was meant as a compliment, by a leading academic in the UK called Ben Goldacre. He described me as a hustler. But I took it as a positive statement, but I basically hustled my way in there. So I went to meet with Transport for London, and I said that I knew a fair bit about the relationship between transport and health, and I thought I had something to offer them. And they said, we're on it, we've got it all sorted, we've even got a publication. And they showed me their publication, and it is a picture on the front cover of a woman cycling past a hospital, and the document is mainly about how to get a bus to a hospital.
Nice.
And that was where we were at in 2013 in London in terms of understanding the complex relationship between transport and health. So I said I thought I might have something that I could add to this conversation, and I offered a try before you buy. It's available to others. 3 months I worked for them. I was being paid by somebody else who was happy to let me go and work for them for 3 months and see if I could add anything to what they were doing already. And then I started working for them part-time, and then I built it up. And now I'm actually hiring a team of people who work directly for the Transport Authority. And in my opinion, to make the kind of change that we need, you do have to take people with that public health expertise and employ them in the organisations that really have the power. Partnership working is hard at the best of times, but you can be so much more effective if you actually work in and with the people who you want to help to do their job differently. So I'm a strong advocate for public health leaving the public health department and going and sitting with the people that they want to influence.
Fantastic. Well, so really interesting story, and it's quite. I think Auckland tends to sort of think that it's always looking elsewhere for answers, and I think Shane mentioned this earlier. You know, we've achieved a lot, and we need to make sure we congratulate ourselves, because success breeds success and breeds confidence, and with confident staff, confident counsellors, you make better decisions at the end of the day. But it's interesting, your program has been quite globally recognised. I mean, I've got people literally emailing from all around the world saying, we want to hear from Lucy as well. So, you know, how are TfL doing in terms of rolling this out within their program? If Shane was to adopt this principle, you know, what are they doing from a practical delivery point of view? How's it happening in reality?
Yeah, so Healthy Streets is one of those things that looks deceptively simple until you scratch under the surface and realise that actually to deliver those 10 indicators, you not only need to completely turn the way the Transport Authority works on its head, but you also need to get a whole load of other stakeholders working alongside. So in London, the Mayor has embedded the Healthy Streets approach in all of his statutory strategies, so it's not just in the transport strategy. It's in the policing and crime plan, it's in the spatial plan, which is called the London Plan, it's in the environment strategy, the health strategy, etc. And that means that all the different parts of the system have to work together, delivering these 10 Healthy Streets indicators. But obviously Transport for London have got a very, very big role in this. And so what has happened is quite a fundamental change in the governance of the organisation and the way that money is allocated and projects are prioritised based on how they're delivering the Healthy Streets approach. Because Healthy Streets is about saying we don't just have a selection of different modes of transport, and whichever mode of transport shouts the loudest gets the most money. It's about saying our streets are a finite space between the buildings, and how can we get those environments to work best for people by balancing all those different modes at the same time, which is a much, much more difficult job.
Yeah, and that, linking that back to budgets as well, and thinking about that there'll be a natural view that to add these things and to consider these things is going to be a cost, but I perhaps, you can't afford not to think about this stuff. So that's probably the best way to...
Well, what I always say is we're spending money every single day on our streets anyway, and it's not about spending more money, it's about spending the money differently.
Great. Look, does anyone want to respond to any of that? I'd like to open up to some questions from the floor. Does anybody want to ask anything of each other, or we can open to the questions? Okay, Richard?
On Lucy's point about the money, I thought one of the funniest, not funny, but the situation around Skypath, many years ago, the discussion was the cost, and I could name 3 road widening projects that were 3 times the price of Skypath, and at that point Skypath wasn't going to be tax or ratepayer funded at all, but yet there was still this terrible kind of discussion around something that was going to be for walking and cycling that might cost some money, but then you'd never ever have the same level of discussion over something like a road widening project, which is kind of 40 million, 50 million, go ahead, do that. And I think, like Lucy said, we're spending the money anyway. How can we retrofit our streets on every single project, even if maybe at this time we can't do the whole thing, but how about we at least start? Because sometimes there's massive missed opportunities when we do renewal projects or rehabilitations of roads where we're not putting back better infrastructure, we're kind of just replacing it and spending all that money anyway. So I think there's a good place to start.